Hello and welcome to another tutorial on Adobe Photoshop CS5.1. Today we are going to use the text tool. Before we go and learn about the text tool, let's go to our website using the web browser in our computer by the name of dafont.com. As you can see here on this website, there are a lot of fonts, and on the right side of each font there is a small download button. You can download all these fonts and they are categorized in different genres and sub-genres. There are many fonts available. Some of these fonts can be bought and some of them are for free download, while most of them are for free download. This is one of the favorite genres, horror, normally preferred by people who like scary movies or the scary movie trilogy. If you're into those parody versions about the Wayans brothers. So if you want to copy your fonts, you can go to the control panel, and if you can't see the fonts icon in the control panel, you can just switch to small icons, and on the left side is the font option. You can select the font option and a small dialog box appears. You can then go to your directory in which you have stored all your fonts, and I store all my fonts by creating a new folder and naming it to the date on which I downloaded all those fonts. After that, you can just go to the page font area and you can click paste, and you can close this font dialog box. Now I'm opened up the previous project that we did, in which we used 5 basic shapes and made a spherical object creating depth. I'm going to create a new layer. This is the text type tool. We are going to select the text type tool, and it's always good practice to create a new layer before you actually select the text type tool. It's initializing the new fonts that have been added into the font directory. This may take a couple of minutes depending on your computer, and here you have the font. Now for this moment in time, I have used the horizontal text option. You just click on any part of Photoshop in any area of the canvas and it creates a vertical text line. Now my PC seems to be going a bit slow, so I'm pausing and then repausing. Okay, so here you see the text seems to be working very nicely, and it seems to be centered align. Using the move tool to bring it to the center of the page. Now if I go to the sub options of the move tool, there is show transform controls. If I select check mark on it, I can see a rectangular box, and on each or any side of that rectangular box there are small dots that appear. If you click and drag and scale your text, it will resize according to your requirements. But if you select the middle chain button that was visible a while back, you can change it in a locked position. It will change equally in vertical and horizontal direction. Now I'm going into the Windows panel and I'm going to use the corrector and the paragraph tabs. Here is the corrector tab and here is the paragraph tab. So I'm going to select the character tab, and it seems to be already be available in our tab area, and the paragraphs tab. So they are grouped together in a tab group, and this is your text layer. Now the character tab has different options. You can select different fonts from the top. You can have different font style effects applied to it, like subscript, underline, overline, italic, bold, etc. Some of these text styles are not available in previous version of Photoshop. Okay, so you can increase the text size or the font size, and now we can also align it to the left, to the center, or to the right side, depending on our required text. And interesting thing about these two panels, the character tab and the paragraph tab, they are quite easily useful for creating intricate sorry, I forgot how to pronounce integrate. So you can create very nice looking logos, text logos, using the character and paragraph tool. And you don't really have to create multiple text layers to create your logos. You can just use one text layer or a text area or a predefined text shape to create your personalized logos. So I'm just trying to realign the overall position to make sure how I want it to be aligned. Should it be left, right, centered, or whatever? And I guess I'm pretty much satisfied with the left alignment. So I'm now going to bring the baseline shift to 0, and this is individual letter spacing. This is called leading, or is it called kerning? It's called tracking. It's not. The other one on the right side is kerning. This is leading. This horizontally scales your text, and this scales your text vertically. Bring it back to 100. You can also change your color using the select text color picker. So now I've brought the text to plain Arial size, which is a very default font type available in all type of software, PCs, different versions. And Arial font is something that gets pre-shipped from in Windows. underlining, overlining. Now what we can do is we can select parts of a letter or parts of a word, and we can also apply these settings to them, so that if we want to design our own custom based text logo, we can do so very easily using both these tabs, the character tab and the paragraph tab. Here I want the HIS in this to go down as a subscript. I can use the baseline shift like I've used before, or I can use it as a subscript. So there are simply many different ways of creating your text effect. It's not one way or the other. There are some finer ways or fine-tuning your spacing between each letters, and there are ways in which you can move your characters in points. So the character tab normally uses the pixel ratios to move your text from one point to another, except for the font size that only operates on the point system, while the paragraph tab completely controls all the text in points. Normally the pre-default fonts also have this option of creating sharp, crisp, strong type of font drawings. They are very much helpful when you want to get your fonts printed. And they can also be accessed from the top sub option area of Photoshop. Now I've changed all the settings and went back to the first type of text. Now I'm going to go to pre-default values. 0 looks pretty good. And now I'm going to create a text area. So creating a text area, you just click and drag your mouse and it creates a dotted box, and you can use the shift key if you want to make it into an equal sided square box, or if you want to move it around, you can press the space key, and as soon as you release the mouse key, the text area gets created. So here you have a rectangular text area. It's very useful for creating columns in your letterhead, on your magazines, or in your newspapers if need be, or in your brochures. So now I'm going to create 3 paragraphs, and I'm just going to copy paste these 3 words, this text area, and create 3 paragraphs. So right now these 3 paragraphs are aligned in a central manner. I can change the alignment as well to left align. Then I can choose one text, the first text, and I can indent it to the right. So this is the top options are used for indenting paragraph text to the right or to the left, vice versa, depending on your requirements. Some of these sub options do not work in the order that they have been given. Like for left alignment, the lower 2 options are not working, while the top first option, indent left margin, works. So you can also fine-tune this indentation of the margins by using the leading tool, by using the not the leading but the kerning tool. Kerning tool, yes. So this kerning tool also helps you in fine-tuning the distance between each and every text, and this works in pixels while the previous one worked in points. So this has a much finer tuned control over the indentation of the text. Although this is not for the not the purpose of this tool, the indentation should be done with the indentation tool in the sub option in the paragraph tab. This is normally used for creating space between individual letters of text or individual letters of a word. And again, this is something to do with formatting. You don't really have to do it to achieve something. If you want to have something that the client wants, the spacing of some selective text to be more than the other, you can change it. You can also use the middle mouse wheel to quickly switch between different text fonts to see what suits you better. So after a couple of tries, I come up with the text font that I really like, and then I use that one. I might change the text font of the second paragraph and vice versa. I can also change the text font of the other paragraph as well, and also the size of the text. So I've chosen to change some part of the third paragraph into one text font and the rest of the part into another text font. So I guess when you select the entire paragraph, then some of these text fonts options start applying to the paragraph. So recap: text line, text area, and now we're going to create a path using the path tool, vector path, and let's see if we can put in text along in this path. If you want to, for example, create a column that based in this manner, you can also create a column, fairly jagged column like in the 50s retro style column. So when you keep on writing and copy pasting the text, it will keep on filling this area until it gets out of bounds. Then the rest of the text starts getting hidden. So you have to be very careful to add the text as you want it, making sure that the text doesn't get hidden, the extra text. You can also change the path shape during construction, and it's always a good practice to turn off the actual text that's placed in here so that the computer does not stall up. You can also create a circular sphere and make the text move around that sphere, or in any case any path. So let's create a path, circular path, and try to create text that moves around this work path. So we have this circular shape selected, circular path selected, and we use the text tool, move it on top of the line instead of inside the line, and it will start writing text on the top side. Now to manipulate this text, you use the selection tool zoom in and use the selection tool to align this text along the circular path. It can be on top of the circular area, or it can be inwards on the inside of the circular path. You can also manipulate the two anchor points, one at the top and one at the bottom, to fairly place the starting and the ending position of the text in this path. There is one small anchor point here at the bottom, and there is one small anchor point on the top. You can manipulate these 2 points to create the starting and ending point of the text, out of which the entire text will not be visible. Inside that starting and ending position, the text will be visible. So for example, if I move this point to this end, the text is only visible by this, and now it's fully visible. So you can move and set it in a manner that you are more comfortable with. Also you can move it inward or outward depending on your own choice. And altogether you can also move this vector path just like you use that previous shape path, and it will be totally editable. For example, if you move the text path, the text will also move all together with it. Same is the case with the random text shape that you created. If you move the text shape, the text will be moved along with it, and if you select and deform individual points, the text will also realign according to the text path. So you can very well easily edit your panels, text panels or text areas using the path tool. I'm going to turn off all the shapes, and let's continue forward with this circular shape. Now I'm going to show you how to turn this circular sphere into an organic shape, let's say an apple. First off, I'll open up my browser and open up a new search for apple, because I want to turn this sphere into apple. I'm going to look for a reference image of an apple that fairly suits what I want out of this sphere. and how it should look. So let's pick this apple. Looks okay. And oops, it has a watermark, so the actual details will be diminished, and as soon as you see the watermark, the screen gets a bit darker. So we want a crisp red apple in a white background. This looks okay. I save this into my hard drive, and I'll also keep this open as a reference. So now I'm going to use the layer in which the sphere was already been created. I can make a copy of this layer, or I can just use this same layer. I think I'm going to use this layer. Go to edit, transform, and then right click, pop-up menu, warp tool. That's warp tool, and it creates a sort of like a square grid or a rectangular grid around your object or around the drawn area in a layer. All you have to do is now make it look so that it's an apple, and it should be close enough to an apple. It doesn't have to be as perfectly looking as an apple, and I guess you'll have to try this on a bunch of times. I mean, it doesn't come out looking like an apple on the first try. You have to save it, apply the warp, and then reapply the warp once again. So I think I applied the warp tool twice or thrice in this situation to make the overall form look like an apple, and just adjusting the anchor points and the lower area to make it come out as curvy as an apple. But right now it looks more like a cartoonish heart, and I'm getting there. So bunch of tweaking here and there. So right now I think it looks more like a cherry than an apple. Yeah, it looks like a cherry or a berry, an apple. But I guess we can reapply the warp tool, and it reapplies it not from the previous position, but it reconfigures it around the area, and then you can further apply the warp settings. There is also a very interesting tool, filter tool by the name of Liquify, that does all of this very efficiently and very quickly without using this rectangular grid. You actually have a brush, and then you can readjust the brush size, strengthen, etc. And maybe I'll make a tutorial video on how to use the Liquify tool, but later on perhaps. It looks like I'm fairly close to the shape of the apple, and it's coming along pretty nicely. It's looking close enough now to the apple. The heart contours on the top edge of the portion of this shape have been smoothened, and it looks more like an apple now than before. Okay, bit of tweaking here and there again. It's always good to keep on viewing how your reference image looks like after each and every deformation, and I'm going to scale it. Shift select, shift click to scale it a bit bigger. Warp it again to make the overall top edges wider and the base a bit narrower. Okay. Okay, so I guess this looks like an apple, but this is just the basic overall shape of the apple. You need to actually make it deform to such an extent that it doesn't look like a cartoonish apple. It looks almost 90 to 95% like the real thing. I mean, if a layman who's not an artist or doesn't have an artist eye, sees it, he says, oh, it's an apple. It should be relatable. It shouldn't be like, or doesn't look like an apple at all. It shouldn't be something like that. So you have to make it look convincingly like an apple. So now we are going to add the further details and the highlights. Overall, this looks like fairly decent looking apple. Though I'm still very much convinced that the base needs to be squinted or narrowed further, but I guess for now it's looking pretty convincing for an apple. So now I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to bring this layer to the back. I'm going to pick the color from the background, and I'm going to draw the back side of this round apple. So make that back end look as if it's pinched in. Keep on coloring it in, and it doesn't have to be very crisp and clear. You can always apply the lasso tool and then erase the bled out area or make it look more neat, as you would call it. Okay, so now I'm adding in some yellows, some highlights, and probably some whites or some browns or streaks inward. Bring the brush opacity down to 10 so that I can slowly build up these contours and detail. Pick up few color from within that inner area and slightly bring about this detail. And there are some striations and some white area inward. Let's add that to the mix, and I can just add this outline shiny sheen that's in the front. I can overall also remove that left highlight that's coming over, but I guess it will look more appealing. As I mentioned, that a reference is something that is only a reference. You really don't have to make a copy of the original reference that's been given. You need to put in something like your own imagination into the mix as well. I mean, if you were to just copy paste something, you could just download an image and copy it from the internet. I mean, why would you want to then put in the effort of doing something that looks similar to something but is actually appropriately different? I mean, if someone actually looked with a very close eye on the internet image that I took and the actual image that I am painting from the tablet, he would see that there's some fairly significant differences between the apple and the shape of the original image photograph. But some people still want something like a photographic look, so I guess over there then you guys have to get through with that if the client really wants something realistic. But I guess even this level of realism is fairly compliant with the client. Normally, my personal experience with the client is that there's some hotshot guy from marketing or some hotshot guy from the HR department or someone who's not actually the boss of things, will come out and say, oh, I don't like this, oh, I don't like that, can you change this, can you change that? And in my opinion, and especially the place where I grew up in and the area where I work in, is that overall what the boss says goes. So if someone somehow or the other comes up and says, oh, I don't like this, can you change this, I think the boss will not like it, or from a marketing point of view, this thing is not going to work. So you say, okay, bring it to me in writing from your boss that he wants to change it. I'll change this stuff up. Without actually talking to the actual owner who commissioned this project to you, you should not change based on the instructions of his number 2 or his number 3. If he says, oh, it's from the boss, you say, well, then bring it to me in writing, or tell him to send me an email, or tell him to send me a text, or especially I would say, tell him to call me. That's the best answer, I would say. Tell him to call me. Give me a call, let me know he wants to change it. And most of the time the boss doesn't even know what you're doing. He's just convinced because he's not a creative type person. He's just a layman. He just wants his product to sell, and according to what he sees, the product is going to sell. Normally, most times these number 2s and number 3s, they actually have their friend who's also a designer, and they got thrown out by this idea that some outsider took the job and their friend or their family member didn't got recommended. So now here I'm applying some Gaussian blur so that the overall shininess and the overall contours are mixed together, and I applied it once again, and here we go. It looks like an apple, shiny, and the back side also looks fairly visible and fairly acceptable, but we can still go further. The detail and some striations in the back area. Yep, so when you add some white striations at the edge of the layer that's behind it, it looks like that it has some kind of depth to it, and this actually helps a lot when you're making your drawing look three-dimensional. So now I'm adding in those stripes at the back, and now it looks like an apple. So now this looks like a studio-based apple, and it looks like an artist actually drew it with detail, light and shadows and such. Now you can add in the bits, but before, I think we should clean this up a bit. Yep, and move the layer slightly upward so that it gives more of a depth. Use the marquee tool and invert the marquee selection, and then just delete it. So after you've reapplied the marquee, and I'm now applying the marquee tool. Sorry about that hammering that you can hear in the background. That's some renovations happening upstairs in my house, so I guess you'll have to bear with the hammering. So okay, so I fix out my marquee selection, and then I clean it up as much as I can, invert selection, and then press delete. So now it's smooth. Zoom in a little bit, see if it is smooth, and it seems smooth. Okay, so next step is to see if you can add these tiny yellow spots. To pick that color that you already selected for the striations, and also add some more detailed shadow work into the base so that it looks pinched from the bottom, narrow and pinched. You can also use the smudge tool to actually make it look like it's pinching from place to place. And I guess the brush actually doesn't do well over here. When you want to smudge something, just unlock the paint area tool and start using the smudge tool. but I guess it doesn't hurt to add some dark outlines first before you actually start painting it up. And you can do the warp effect, but I guess it doesn't go well because the overall upper area information might get distorted. And here you can see that this lock is already enabled, so I move this lock and then I increased and decreased the brush size of the smudge tool and the strength of the smudge tool, which is 60%, and then I moved it up so that it gives like a pinched off base look to it, and voila, it looks fairly close to what we want. You can still make it look as close to as the real thing as you want, and when you turn the shadow off it looks fairly decent, so I guess that's okay. And normally most people don't look at the base of the apple that clearly or that much in detail, so you can get by because it's normally hidden off in the shadows. Also reduce the strength of the shadow to like 70%. 70% would do nicely. Let's check it out if it can be better at 80. So 70 looks okay, or 80 looks fine. So okay, 80%. Coming back to the apple shape, create a new layer, and in this layer what I want to do is select the apple marquee from the layer 3 and then start adding some highlights on the other side of the apple. I can go with some yellow highlights instead of white, paint in some slight white color highlights, and then quickly switch to some dark yellow or some light yellowish pinkish highlights, and then go for something like in the area of yellow spots and yellow highlights. You can also do is you can add some spots, these tiny yellow spots. Just use your mouse and take the opacity to 100. Just click, change the size of the brush 10, 15, 8, 10, 15, 8, and just keep on adding these small dots. Be very random with these dots. You don't have to make them look so symmetrical. They should be asymmetrical because probably you might want to add a small slight blur effect or lower down the opacity a little bit. That always helps. So let's see. Oh, and also add some stripy striations over the highlight that you created recently, and probably draw it in this layer. Should you draw it in this layer? Let's see. If I draw it in this layer, can I apply the blur? Okay, so I guess so. Yeah, it looks fairly nice. I can add some white further on, and this white looks a bit dark. Reduce the brush amount, go back to the lower layer and add the white over there so that it pops out from the bottom. All you can do is go to opacity 10, draw it up a little bit more, and probably add another Gaussian blur to this layer. That always will help with the highlight. Or you can just use a fine brush and then tone it down, mix it up like you do with watercolors. Now I'm adding back some reds into it so that that yellow that's on top pops out from this highlight. And I guess that looks fairly okay. Again, I might later on add in a dash of what you call Gaussian blur still. So let's keep working with this. Add in some dark color tones. And okay. So Gaussian blur, take the amount down slightly below actual amount. It was too high, so now it looks like a clean crisp apple. Okay, so this looks okay. And there you have it. So we are not still done, although we might add a Gaussian blur to the spotted area, or the layer in which we added the spots and the highlights, and also use the eraser tool, take the opacity down slightly to 10 so that you can erase some of this yellow probably. Yep, I want to reduce the amount of yellow on this side, the highlight portion. So you can use the eraser as an airbrush also and erase slowly and gradually from the area that you don't want. So that's that highlight. Now it's in the photo it's a white highlight, but I wanted it to be a yellow highlight. Sort of matches the background that I'm working with. And guess we can add some more highlight to the top area, and just deselecting some of the top area, create a new layer, add a white tinge to this, the white highlight that's on the side, pick a white color and fairly fill it up with 100% white, and then take it down to 10%. 10% looks good. Now I'm going to add a layer style effect. Just see if it looks better this way, or if I add a layer style effect will look much better than then. Okay, so let's add in layer style effect. So double click on the layer, and I'm still checking to see if I can work it out with the opacity. I don't seem to be able to. So I'm going to add a gradient overlay, black to white, and I'm going to see if it is 90 degrees. 90 degrees looks fine. Check to see if I can work around with some of the settings of the gradient overlay. Add a smooth scale gradient, and looks pretty nice. Click OK. Reversing it won't do. So here you have it. So now I can start working on some stalks. You can also apply a motion Gaussian blur to this so that it lightens up a little bit more and gives you more of a crisper detail in the highlights, especially on the edges. So I'm selecting the layer 3 selection by control clicking on layer 3 and then applying the Gaussian blur so that it gives me a smooth shiny transition from the highlight area at the bottom. Okay, I'm just tweaking to see which is the best blur setting, and 26.1% looks fairly okay. Awesome. So now it looks like a very nice apple and makes you feel hungry, I guess. So I would say that you guys can have it if you can make a 3D find a 3D printer that can actually print out an apple from different chemicals. Or I think there might be a 3D printer somewhere in the world that can actually create an apple from out of nothing. I mean, it's the imagination of Star Wars coming to reality. So now I'm trying to make the stalk of the apple, the stalk and the leaf, and I'm trying to figure out, should I move the leaf to this side, or should I move it to the other side, or I can just look at the reference and okay, so the apple leaf is on the is fairly tapered to the left side, so I'm going to make left-sided apple, draw the stalk, and it's just a reference. I mean, you can paint over it and the overall information won't be lost. So I can just take green and yellow and start painting over this, and it won't cause any trouble. Now I'm going to make the leaf. It takes a few tries to actually bring the leaf actually the way it's in the photograph. Again, you still don't have to bring it as close to the original thing as possible, because you're not doing some kind of trace work. You're actually doing something out of your own imagination and using a reference for it. So you have to add in some of your own touch to it, and I guess it doesn't hurt to sometimes use a reference. Normally, when I am going to be posting a few more videos on how to draw manga characters, or how to draw their head profiles, I might not be using a reference. I will be using my own imagination to draw their profiles, but the actual images that I did for the concept art of those characters was actually done using my own imagination. So I guess I'm going to be using some imaginatively inspired drawings and use those drawings as somewhat as a reference for doing that video tutorial on heads. So I guess I did a few video tutorials today on that, and I'm still figuring out how it should look from the top, and I came about to the conclusion that the leaf shouldn't really be that big. And I guess you can come out and always change the size of the leaf to what you want. It doesn't have to be very big. You can also have something of a very small tapered looking leaf from one side. Okay, so I guess I'm satisfied with this leaf now, and I'm going to add in a brown color and another green color, and I'm going to start painting on the stalk. Bring the hardness down to 0, bring the brush size to slightly up, and start painting the same layer on which I drew the outlines. So I painted over this stalk, and it's 30 degrees and 30% opacity. Kept on using the color picker, and then I'm going to use a darker tone of red to make it look like a dark brown shade. Also, I can come over back and use the marquee tool and just erase the portions that I don't need. So now it's like a dark brown stalk. I want to add some green and white into it. So again, it's all about how you see colors and how you see things in real life. Maybe you'll see something other than this when you're doing this on your own. I'm seeing something from my own eyes. I mean, some people are colorblind, some people see colors varying on different intensities. Some people see a red color, while another person will say, no, it's a bright red color. So people have different ways of seeing color. Some people will see them in much detail, and other people won't see them. So let's take a few minutes, and this looks fairly like a stalk now, actually brownish, dark brownish, with a tinge of green in it. So now I'm using the bright red color to actually form some outlines, and I've zoomed in slightly so that I can fix and erase the areas that I don't really want. And there you have it, just erasing using the eraser tool. Add an opacity of 10 and 100, switching between different opacities so that I can get a clear cut stock look out of it. And it is always good to make a stock that is slightly uneven and unsymmetrical. From in real life, that stocks are slightly unsymmetrical. So here we go, looks fairly decent like a stock. Add some black outlines and make sure that the brush size is fairly small so that the outlines don't bleed out. Pick a color from within to merge it, and it looks fairly decent. Now pick a green color for this portion of the leaf which has the stalkier part. Take a lemon green color for the leaf. Normally foliage is in lemon green or bright green. Draw the bracteate area from which the leaf is coming out from the stalk, and looks fairly bright. Now pick a bigger size brush and paint over the area where the leaf is going to be outlined. Keep on adding color. Keep the opacity when you're filling some shape to 30% so that after 2 or 3 brush applications the appropriate amount of color is applied. And also one big thing that you must keep in mind is that if you turn off the background image or the BG brown background, it shouldn't look like as if that the paint is transparent or the back of the paint is looking semi-transparent. So I guess keep comparing the leaf, looking at the highlights, the shadows, where the shadows are being formed, and you can also pretty much decide on your own how you want the shadows to look like so that it doesn't mess around with what you're doing. So add some highlights and shadows on the leaf and keep on working on the leaf. So I guess I've talked a lot in this video tutorial, and this video tutorial was fairly like 2 hours long, it was like, I think it's more than 1 hour and probably 10 minutes or 5 minutes or so. So it was a fairly long tutorial, and I guess that's it. You might want to add some veins to the leaf later on with a bright green color so that they pop out. Just figure out the outlines, clean up the overall area or the shape of the leaf, and you're done. So I guess that's it for today, and see you real soon. Do stay over to see how the leaf gets done. I bid you adieu and see you soon, the next interesting tutorial. Bye bye.